Title: Why Switzerland is so rich, the country that broke the rules. Target length: 30 to 35 minutes. Narration style: warm, conversational male documentary voice. Imagine waking up in a country where the average worker earns more in a month than many people in developed countries earn in several months. A country with no ocean access, no giant oil reserves, no massive domestic market, no empire-sized farmland, and a landscape so mountainous that for most of history, simply moving goods from one valley to another was an engineering problem. Now imagine that same country becoming one of the richest places on Earth. Not rich in a flashy, accidental way. Not rich because it discovered petroleum under the ground. Not rich because it conquered half the planet. Rich in a strangely deliberate way. Rich through systems, through trust, through precision, through political restraint, through trains that actually arrive, through companies that sell tiny luxury machines, life-saving drugs, baby formula, chocolate, insurance, private banking, and refined gold to the entire world. This country is Switzerland, and the more you look at it, the stranger the story becomes. Switzerland is not supposed to be this rich. Look at the map. It is small. It is landlocked. It sits in the middle of Europe, surrounded by larger powers: Germany, France, Italy, Austria, and tiny Liechtenstein. It has 4 national languages. Its geography is split between the Alps, the Central Plateau, and the Jura. Roughly 58% of the country is Alpine. The mountains are beautiful, but beauty is not an economic strategy. Mountains make transport harder. They reduce farmland. They separate communities. They make invasion difficult, but they also make ordinary life more expensive. And yet, according to World Bank data, Switzerland's GDP passed the $1 trillion mark in 2025, with GDP per person above $110,000 in current dollars. Its population is just over 9 million. Its median monthly gross wage was 7,024 Swiss francs in 2024, according to the Swiss Federal Statistical Office. It ranks at or near the top of global innovation rankings. It exports hundreds of billions of francs of goods, not by being the cheapest, but by being trusted at the high end. So how did a small mountain country build a $1 trillion economy? The easy answer is banking. The better answer is that Switzerland learned to turn its disadvantages into a business model. It had mountains, so it became excellent at infrastructure. It lacked resources, so it specialized in knowledge and high-value manufacturing. It had many languages and cultures, so it became good at compromise. It was surrounded by conflict, so it sold stability. It was too small to dominate the world, so it became useful to the world. And in a very Swiss twist, its wealth came not from breaking every rule, but from designing a system where the rules themselves became a product. To understand Switzerland, start with the mountains. For centuries, the Alps were not a postcard. They were a barrier, a wall of rock and snow cutting Europe into regions, trade routes, languages, and kingdoms. But Switzerland sat right on the passes. If you wanted to move people, armies, letters, money, or goods between northern and southern Europe, the Swiss territory mattered. That geography created a harsh economic lesson. Survival required coordination. You could not casually build roads through Alpine valleys. You could not farm endless open plains. You could not rely on a single capital city to control everything easily. Communities had to cooperate across difficult terrain, manage common resources, and negotiate with neighbors. Over time, this helped form a political culture that was local, practical, and suspicious of concentrated power. Switzerland did not become a centralized empire. It became a confederation. That matters because Swiss wealth is not only about money. It is about institutions. The country developed a habit of pushing decisions downward, to cantons, to municipalities, to referendums, to citizens. The result can look slow from the outside. Switzerland often moves carefully, but when a decision is made, it has a kind of durability that investors, companies, and households value. In most countries, politics swings like a pendulum. In Switzerland, politics often works more like a machine with many brakes. That can frustrate reformers, but it also creates predictability. Predictability is boring, and boring is valuable. The second piece of the story is neutrality. Swiss neutrality is sometimes described as if Switzerland simply chose to avoid all problems. That is not accurate. Swiss neutrality emerged through war, defeat, diplomacy, and survival. The Swiss Confederates were defeated at Marignano in 1515. The idea of neutrality strengthened over time, and Swiss neutrality was formally recognized internationally at the Congress of Vienna in 1815. From that point forward, Switzerland built a national identity around staying out of external military alliances and conflicts. This did not mean Switzerland had no army. In fact, the Swiss military tradition is central to the story. The country maintained a militia-based defense system, fortified mountains, and prepared to make invasion costly. Neutrality worked because it was paired with seriousness. Switzerland's promise was not, "We are harmless." It was closer to, "We are not joining your war, and entering our territory will be a problem." That combination made Switzerland unusual. In a continent repeatedly torn apart by conflict, Switzerland became a stable node. During the 19th and 20th centuries, this stability attracted money, companies, international organizations, skilled migrants, and institutions that wanted a politically reliable base in Europe. Geneva became home to diplomacy and humanitarian organizations. Zurich became a financial center. Basel became a life sciences hub. Bern became the federal capital of a country built less around imperial ambition than around internal balance. This is one of the big hidden themes in Swiss wealth. Switzerland sold trust, not just banking secrecy, although that became famous. Trust in contracts, trust in institutions, trust in low inflation, trust in infrastructure, trust that property would be protected, trust that the country would not suddenly nationalize your business or collapse into chaos. Trust compounds like interest. A country that is trusted can borrow more cheaply, attract better companies, recruit talent, hold wealth, and charge premium prices. When people trust a label, a drug, a bank, a train timetable, or a watch, they pay for it. This is where banking enters the story. Swiss banking did not become powerful only because of secret accounts. That is the movie version. The deeper reason is that Switzerland became a safe, stable, multilingual, legally sophisticated financial center in the middle of Europe. It had political neutrality, a strong currency, a tradition of privacy, and banks skilled at serving international clients. For much of the 20th century, this produced enormous advantages. Wealth from unstable countries could be placed in Swiss banks. International companies could finance operations. Investors could use Switzerland as a base for cross-border wealth management. The Swiss franc became associated with safety. But banking is also where the myth becomes complicated. Swiss wealth did not come from banking alone, and banking secrecy created real moral and political problems. Switzerland faced international pressure over tax evasion, money laundering, and hidden assets. Banking secrecy was weakened significantly in the 21st century as automatic exchange of tax information became the international standard. The old Swiss banking model changed. Then, in 2023, Credit Suisse collapsed into an emergency takeover by UBS. For a country that sold financial stability, it was a brutal reminder that even Switzerland is not immune to global finance. And yet the economy did not collapse with it. That is the point. Switzerland is richer than its banks. Its economy is a web of high-value niches. Take pharmaceuticals. Basel is one of the most important life sciences clusters in the world. Roche and Novartis are headquartered there. These companies do not compete by making the cheapest products. They compete in research, patents, clinical trials, complex manufacturing, global regulatory approval, and trust. The Swiss chemical and pharmaceutical sector is the country's largest export engine. Swiss sources report that chemical, pharmaceutical, and life sciences products contributed roughly 149 billion Swiss francs to export trade in 2024, around half of total goods exports. That is staggering for a country of 9 million people. To see why this matters, compare a kilogram of raw agricultural output with a kilogram of advanced medicine. The value density is completely different. Switzerland specializes in things where a small country can create enormous value without needing enormous land. This is one of the keys to the Swiss model. Export value, not volume. The same logic explains watches. A cheap watch tells time. A Swiss watch tells a story. Rolex, Patek Philippe, Omega, Audemars Piguet, Tag Heuer, and dozens of other brands turn precision engineering into status. A mechanical watch is, in some ways, technologically obsolete. Your phone keeps better time. But Swiss watchmaking survived because it moved from utility to identity. In the 1970s and 1980s, the quartz crisis nearly destroyed Swiss watchmaking. Japanese quartz watches were cheaper, accurate, and mass-produced. Switzerland could have disappeared from the industry. Instead, it split the market. On one end, Swatch helped revive volume and design. On the other, luxury brands doubled down on craftsmanship, heritage, scarcity, and mechanical prestige. By 2024, Swiss watch exports were about 26 billion Swiss francs, according to the Federation of the Swiss watch industry. That figure is smaller than pharmaceuticals, but its symbolic power is huge. It shows how Switzerland sells precision with a premium attached. The Swiss label itself became an economic asset. Swiss-made, two words that turn steel, gears, and glass into something more valuable. But Switzerland's economy is not only watches and medicine. It is also food. Nestlé, headquartered in Vevey, is one of the largest food and beverage companies in the world. It sells coffee, baby food, bottled water, pet food, chocolate, medical nutrition, and countless everyday products across global markets. Switzerland does not have the largest agricultural base, but Nestlé shows the same pattern again. Take something ordinary, build technology, branding, logistics, science, and distribution around it, and sell it globally. This pattern repeats in machinery, precision instruments, insurance, logistics, specialty chemicals, and engineering. Switzerland is not trying to be the factory floor of the world. It is trying to own the hard part, the patent, the recipe, the brand, the financial structure, the machine tool, the clinical trial, the quality certification, the tiny component that cannot fail, the premium customer relationship. This is why Switzerland can pay high wages and still compete. It does not compete mainly on low labor costs. It competes where trust, precision, legal stability, and expertise matter enough that customers tolerate high prices. Now at gold. Swiss gold refining is one of the strangest and least understood parts of the economy. Switzerland has very little gold mining of its own, but became a global hub for refining and trading gold. The reason is a mixture of history, banking, logistics, political stability, and specialist refineries. Gold is dense value. It is exactly the kind of product a small, secure, sophisticated country can handle. You do not need a coastline to refine gold. You need trust, security, skilled operators, stable law, and access to global markets. Swiss foreign trade statistics show precious metals and gemstones as one of the country's largest trade categories. This can distort trade numbers because gold is both imported and exported in large values. But economically, it reinforces the same lesson. Switzerland is an expert at handling valuable things. Valuable goods, valuable data, valuable medicine, valuable timepieces, valuable capital. That is the Swiss economy in one sentence. But there's a deeper system underneath all of this: education. Switzerland does not only produce university graduates. It produces skilled workers through a strong vocational education and training system. In many countries, vocational training is treated as a second-best option. In Switzerland, it is often a first choice. OECD research describes upper secondary vocational education and training as a mainstream route, with most VT students in apprenticeship-based programs. This matters because high-value manufacturing needs people who can actually make things. Not just managers, not just consultants, technicians, machinists, lab workers, watchmakers, engineers, railway operators, pharmaceutical production specialists, hospitality professionnels, people trained inside companies and classrooms at the same time. The Swiss education system connects school to the labor market in a practical way. Companies are not just complaining about skills shortages from the sidelines. They are part of training the workforce. That makes the country unusually good at precision industries. It also reduces the social divide between academic and non-academic routes. A Swiss apprenticeship can be a serious career path, not a consolation prize. And because the system allows further training later, people are not permanently locked into one route. Now, combine that with immigration. Switzerland is often imagined as old, traditional, and closed. But its labor market depends heavily on foreign workers. The population passed 9 million in 2024. A large share of residents have foreign nationality or migration background. International workers staff hospitals, labs, universities, restaurants, construction sites, finance offices, and engineering firms. This creates tension. Immigration is politically sensitive. Housing is expensive. Infrastructure is crowded. Identity debates are real. But economically, Switzerland has used immigration to expand its talent pool far beyond what a country of 9 million could generate by itself. High wages attract talent. Talent strengthens high-value industries. High-value industries support high wages. That loop is powerful. It is also fragile. If housing becomes unaffordable, if political backlash limits skilled migration too sharply, or if neighboring countries become more attractive, Switzerland could face bottlenecks. The country is rich partly because it is small and selective. But being small also means it needs the outside world. This is one of the quiet contradictions at the center of Switzerland. The country has a strong national identity, but its economy is international. It protects local control, but depends on foreign markets. It values stability, but recruits people from a changing world. It is famous for tradition, but its richest industries are built on science, engineering, and constant adaptation. That contradiction is not a flaw in the model. It is the model. Switzerland is constantly balancing openness and control. Too much openness, and voters fear losing the country that made the economy valuable in the first place. Too much control, and companies lose the workers, customers, and market access they need to grow. The Swiss system does not solve that tension once and for all. It manages it, referendum by referendum, treaty by treaty, company by company. That outside world is another key to Swiss wealth. Switzerland is not isolated. It is deeply connected. It is not a member of the European Union, but it is economically intertwined with Europe through treaties, trade, labor movement arrangements, supply chains, and geography. Swiss companies sell globally. Swiss trains connect cities to borders. Swiss airports connect a landlocked country to the world. Swiss diplomacy works because the country is both distinct from and embedded in Europe. This is one of the ways Switzerland broke the rules. It did not join the EU, but it gained extensive access to European markets. It stayed neutral but participated in global institutions. It remained small but built companies with worldwide reach. It preserved local democracy but hosted multinational headquarters. It charged high prices but made products people still bought. It avoided being a superpower but became a place superpowers could use. The result is a country that often gets the advantages of integration while preserving an image of independence. That balancing act is not easy. It requires constant negotiation. And internally, the Swiss political system is built for negotiation. Switzerland has 26 cantons, each with significant authority. Taxes are levied at federal, cantonal, and municipal levels. Voters regularly decide national and local issues through referendums and initiatives. The federal government is led by a collective federal council rather than a single presidential figure dominating politics. This makes Swiss politics slower, more decentralized, and less theatrical than politics in many countries. But slowness is not always weakness. For investors and companies, sudden policy shocks are expensive. Switzerland's system makes radical changes harder. It distributes power. It forces compromise. It gives citizens a sense that they can intervene directly, that can build legitimacy. The tax system is also part of the economic model. Switzerland is not simply a no-tax paradise. It has public services, infrastructure, social insurance, and high living standards that require funding. But its federal structure creates tax competition among cantons and municipalities. A company or wealthy resident can face different tax conditions depending on where they live or operate. This competition can attract businesses and high-income individuals. It can also create inequality between regions and controversy abroad. But in economic terms, it is one more example of Swiss decentralization becoming a competitive tool. The country turns governance into a marketplace. Cantons compete. Municipalities manage. Citizens vote. Companies choose. And the whole system tends to reward stability, efficiency, and restraint. This is also why Switzerland can look confusing from the outside. Many countries try to attract business by making big national promises. One tax policy, one industrial strategy, one leader announcing one grand plan. Switzerland often works the other way. It allows many local systems to compete and learn from each other. One canton may be more attractive for a company headquarters. Another may be better for research. Another may have a different mix of housing, schools, and taxes. The result is not perfect equality, but it creates pressure on local governments to be competent. In a small country, incompetence is visible. If a train connection fails, people notice. If a canton becomes too expensive or too bureaucratic, people compare. If a policy is unpopular, citizens can challenge it. That constant pressure is part of why Swiss public administration has a reputation for seriousness. The system is not fast. It is not dramatic, but it makes it harder for failure to hide. Infrastructure is where that restraint becomes visible. Switzerland's trains are not just transportation. They are economic architecture. In a mountainous country with expensive labor and limited space, moving people efficiently is essential. Swiss Federal Railways reports punctuality transparently, and recent data shows very high passenger train punctuality. The network connects workers to jobs, tourists to mountains, students to universities, and businesses to airports and borders. The Gotthard Base Tunnel is the perfect symbol. It is one of the longest railway tunnels in the world, cut through the Alps to move passengers and freight more efficiently between northern and southern Europe. It represents the Swiss approach: spend heavily, engineer carefully, solve the geographic problem, and make the country more useful. Again, the mountain is not just an obstacle. It becomes a reason to build competence. The same is true in cities. Zurich is a financial and technology hub. Geneva is diplomacy, trading, banking, and international organizations. Basel is pharma and chemicals. Lausanne connects research, sport, and education. Bern provides political stability. Lucerne, Interlaken, Zermatt, and countless Alpine regions turn geography into tourism. No single city explains Switzerland. The wealth is distributed through specialized nodes. This reduces dependence on one industry, even when some industries become enormous. Tourism deserves its own place in this story because it shows how Switzerland learned to monetize geography without relying only on raw nature. The Alps were always there, but tourism required railways, hotels, mountain lifts, branding, safety standards, language skills, and global marketing. Switzerland did not simply have mountains. It packaged the mountain experience. It made it accessible to wealthy travelers in the 19th century, then to middle-class tourists, and to global visitors seeking skiing, hiking, wellness, luxury shopping, and postcard landscapes. Places like Zermatt, St. Moritz, Interlaken, Davos, Grindelwald, and Lucerne became more than destinations. They became symbols of a clean, safe, orderly mountain dream. And again, the pattern is the same. Switzerland takes something physical, like a mountain, and surrounds it with reliability. The train runs. The hotel is clean. The cable car is inspected. The trail is marked. The view is marketed. The simple asset becomes a premium product. This does not mean tourism is the largest part of Swiss wealth. It is not, but it reinforces the Swiss brand, and the Swiss brand reinforces the rest of the economy. A visitor who experiences Swiss order in the Alps may later trust a Swiss watch, a Swiss bank, a Swiss medicine, or a Swiss engineering firm more easily. The next ingredient is currency. The Swiss franc is one of the world's classic safe haven currencies. In times of global uncertainty, investors often buy francs. That reflects trust, but it also creates problems. A strong franc makes Swiss exports more expensive. For a country built on exports, that can hurt. So Swiss companies have had to adapt. They cut costs where possible, move some production abroad, focus on premium markets, and sell products where quality matters more than price. A strong currency punishes weak exporters. It forces companies to justify their prices. That pressure may be painful, but over time it reinforces the Swiss economic style. Do not be cheap. Be worth it. That phrase could sit above the entire Swiss economy. You can see this in the way Swiss companies treat the middle of the market. In many industries, the middle is dangerous. If you're not the cheapest and not the best, you get squeezed. Switzerland avoids that trap by pushing upward. Its companies aim for advanced medicine, premium food brands, luxury watches, private banking, specialty engineering, and precision components. These are markets where reputation creates pricing power. That pricing power funds research. Research creates better products. Better products protect reputation. Reputation protects pricing power. This is a second feedback loop inside the larger national one. The danger, of course, is arrogance. A premium reputation can become a cushion that hides weakness. Credit Suisse is a warning here. A historic name, a global brand, and a Swiss address were not enough to protect it from years of scandals, risk failures, and lost confidence. Trust is powerful, but it is not automatic. It has to be re-earned continuously. That is why the Swiss model is not a license to relax. It is a demand for discipline. Now, to understand the wealth fully, we need to look at inflation and public finances. Switzerland has often had relatively low inflation compared with many advanced economies. Low inflation protects savings and supports long-term planning. The country also has a reputation for cautious public finance. Its debt break rule limits federal spending across the economic cycle. Public debt levels are low by the standards of many rich countries. This matters because wealth is not just income. Wealth is what remains stable across generations. If salaries are high, but inflation eats purchasing power, the headline number deceives you. If public finances are shaky, prosperity feels nervous. Switzerland's wealth feels durable because its systems are designed to avoid extremes. Of course, this creates trade-offs. Swiss life is expensive. Rent is expensive. Health insurance is expensive. Restaurants are expensive. Childcare can be expensive. A high salary in Switzerland does not translate directly into unlimited comfort. For many households, the cost of living absorbs a large share of income. This is where the YouTube title needs nuance. Switzerland is rich, but not every Swiss resident feels rich. A country can have world-leading wages and still have affordability stress. A country can be admired for infrastructure and still struggle with housing. A country can attract skilled migrants and still argue fiercely over immigration. A country can run strong companies and still face pressure from global competition. Switzerland is not magic. It is a machine, and machines require maintenance. There is another nuance. GDP per capita can make Switzerland look richer than daily life feels. GDP per person measures economic output divided by population. It does not mean every person receives that amount. It is influenced by high-value exports, multinational profits, financial activity, and exchange rates. Switzerland's strong franc can make dollar-based comparisons look especially impressive. Meanwhile, ordinary residents face very real bills in Swiss francs. So a good documentary should not present Switzerland as a place where everyone is casually wealthy. It should present it as a country where the economy is unusually productive, where wages are unusually high, and where the cost structure is also unusually demanding. That distinction matters, because the Swiss lesson is not be expensive and everything works out. The Swiss lesson is be productive enough, trusted enough, and specialized enough that the world keeps paying high prices. Its future challenges are serious. First, banking. The UBS Credit Suisse merger created a banking giant in a small country. That raises the question, what happens if a bank becomes too big for the country that hosts it? Swiss regulators now face the challenge of preserving a global financial center while reducing systemic risk. Second, relations with Europe. Switzerland depends heavily on access to European markets and labor, but also wants sovereignty over domestic rules. That balance has become harder as the EU demands more institutional alignment. Switzerland's wealth depends on being connected, but its politics depends on feeling independent. Third, demographics. An aging population increases pressure on pensions, healthcare, and labor supply. Immigration helps, but immigration also intensifies political and housing pressures. Fourth, housing and cost of living. High wages attract people and capital, but limited land and strong demand push up prices. If young workers cannot afford the places where opportunity exists, the system becomes less flexible. Fifth, climate. The Alps are warming. Glaciers are retreating. Winter tourism faces long-term pressure. Mountain infrastructure, hydroelectric power, water resources, and natural hazards all become part of the economic story. Sixth, global tax and regulation. Switzerland's advantage as a business location is affected by international tax rules, transparency requirements, sanctions, banking compliance, and geopolitical pressure. Seventh, competition. Other countries want to build biotech hubs, financial centers, luxury brands, and innovation ecosystems. Switzerland's high costs mean it must keep climbing the value ladder. Eighth, neutrality itself is becoming harder to define. In the 19th century, neutrality mostly meant staying out of wars between European states. In the 21st century, conflict moves through sanctions, cyber attacks, finance, energy, supply chains, and information networks. Switzerland has joined sanctions in some cases, faced pressure from allies and others, and debated what neutrality means when economic systems are deeply connected. This matters economically because neutrality is part of the Swiss trust product. If the world believes Switzerland is stable, fair, and predictable, the brand remains valuable. But if neutrality is seen as moral evasion by some countries, or is no longer credible by others, Switzerland has to adapt without losing the core of its identity. Ninth, innovation is expensive. Being number one in an innovation ranking is not a trophy you keep forever. It requires universities, research labs, patent systems, venture capital, skilled immigration, corporate investment, and a culture that tolerates specialized expertise. Switzerland has many of these pieces, but the global race is intensifying. The United States has scale. China has industrial ambition. Singapore has speed. The European Union has market size and regulation. Switzerland has to keep proving that small can still mean world-class. 10th, climate pressure hits the image of Switzerland directly. For some countries, climate change is mostly an energy or agriculture story. For Switzerland, It is also a national identity story. Glaciers, snow, alpine villages, winter tourism, hydropower, rail tunnels, mountain roads, and natural hazards are all tied to the Swiss landscape. As glaciers retreat and snow patterns change, the country will have to spend heavily on adaptation while rethinking parts of its tourism economy. In other words, the same mountains that helped define Switzerland's brand are now becoming a test of its resilience. So the real question is not simply why Switzerland is rich. The question is whether Switzerland can keep being rich in the same way. The answer depends on whether the country can preserve the feedback loops that made it successful. Trust creates capital. Capital funds innovation. Innovation supports high wages. High wages attract talent. Talent builds companies. Companies fund public services. Public services sustain trust. That loop is the Swiss miracle. But break too many links and the system weakens. This is why Switzerland's wealth is so fascinating. It is not one secret. It is not just banks. It is not just neutrality. It is not just watches. It is not just mountains. It is the interaction of all of them. Think of it like a watch movement. One gear is banking. One gear is pharma. One gear is direct democracy. One gear is the apprenticeship system. One gear is immigration. One gear is infrastructure. One gear is the Swiss franc. One gear is the Alps. One gear is neutrality. On its own, none of these explains everything. Plenty of countries have mountains. Plenty of banks. Plenty have universities. Plenty have neutrality, or low taxes, or famous brands. Switzerland's advantage is that the gears mesh. The institutions support the industries. The industries support the wages. The wages attract talent. The talent supports innovation. The innovation supports exports. The exports support the currency. The currency supports trust. And trust supports the institutions. This is why copying Switzerland is so difficult. You cannot just copy the tax rate. You cannot just copy the trains. You cannot just copy banking secrecy, especially in a world where that model has largely changed. You cannot just put a red flag on a product and charge more. The value comes from the whole system being credible. Geography forced local cooperation. Neutrality created stability. Federalism created predictable compromise. Education created skilled workers. Immigration expanded the talent base. Infrastructure connected difficult terrain. Manufacturing focused on precision. Pharma turned science into exports. Finance sold trust. Tourism sold beauty. Luxury brands sold identity. Taxes and regulation attracted capital. And the Swiss franc turned stability into a global signal. The country broke the rules because it refused to accept the usual path to wealth. It did not need an empire. It did not need oil. It did not need a giant population. It did not need a coastline. Instead, Switzerland became a specialist country. It specialized in being reliable. That sounds simple. It is not. Reliability is expensive. It takes decades. It requires courts, schools, apprenticeships, tunnels, regulations, companies, habits, and a culture that rewards doing the small things correctly. It is much easier to look rich for a few years than to be trusted for a century. This is why the Swiss economy can feel almost unfair from the outside. A small country sells coffee to the world through Nestle. It sells medicine through Roche and Novartis. It sells time through Rolex and the watch industry. It sells banking through UBS and private wealth managers. It sells diplomacy through Geneva. It sells mountains through tourism. It sells safety through the franc. It sells precision through machinery and instruments. And it sells the idea that if something is Swiss, it will probably work. That idea is one of the most valuable exports on Earth. But here is the final twist. Switzerland's greatest economic achievement may not be any single industry. It may be the ability to make boring systems feel luxurious. A train arriving on time. A contract being enforced. A currency holding value. A factory meeting tolerance. A medicine passing regulation. A watch ticking for generations. A local vote deciding a tax. A country staying calm while the world shakes around it. These things are not glamorous in the moment. They're not viral. They do not look like disruption, but they compound. And over decades, they create something rare, a rich country that looks, from the outside, almost impossible. No oil, no coastline, no vast domestic market, mostly mountains, for languages, surrounded by larger powers, and somehow one of the richest nations in human history. Switzerland did not beat the world by being bigger. It beat the world by becoming harder to replace. That is the real secret. The country that broke the rules did not escape economics. It understood economics better than almost anyone. It learned that in a crowded world, the most profitable position is not always to be the loudest, the largest, or the cheapest. Sometimes, the richest place is the one everyone trusts. And for more than a century, Switzerland has turned trust into an industry.